Okay.
And then we can like check and make sure that, or I'll have to like check and make sure that the audio works. But I should be able to do that in the background. Um, so yeah, I've also never done intros, and I can also make sure to not. So far, you're fully pseudonymous, and we can keep you that way. I'll do my best not to call you by name. Uh,
Yeah.
so okay, the thing we were just chatting about, now that this thing is actually live, which I think it um, is just how, and yeah, you really can't hear a leaf bar. It's so loud.
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
can hear it now a little
okay,
bit.
yeah, okay, yeah. Audio seems good. I think. Let's see. Let me make sure.
And this is a video too, right?
Yeah, you can here. You want the link? I can like send you the. All right, this does seem to be working. Get the typical. How do you want me to send the? Whatever. Yes, it's live. You're black and white. We're always
Yep.
black and white, but you're up there.
Cool.
Um, so rehashing that just for the benefit of people actually following along. So we met in kind of a little bit before full fever pitch insanity ICO world, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the I was just talking to someone else recently about that era of crypto, and I was realizing just how outside of that culture that I was. Like I never felt like I understood um, yeah, kind of 2017 era, like Ethereum really taking off, ICO insanity. I like it made no, it just didn't make sense to me like at all. Um, and I was realizing in this prior conversation how actually Urbit was perceived very like positively by most of those people, and I actually had no, I didn't even really have any concept of that. Um, so I'm curious because I feel like you were pretty embedded in that world, like more so than I was. Like whether that, like this other conversation made me realize that I had never really fully checked that assumption or something, or like really like understood that, if that makes sense. So I'm curious if it actually is true from your perception, or does that make sense? Like I'm like, what was,
Yeah. 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 Well,
what did
you've been
Urban even look
like,
like? You know?
yeah, I mean, you've been kind of like deepest into Urbit Fight Club. And I think you were in the shadow world. Um, I mean, like, yeah, I think the view of Urbit has always been positive in that, like, it's not sketchy at all, and it's also super interesting. And every other project, even the big ones, there's always like a wave of skepticism around that. Um, I think Urbit then and still now resembles in some ways 2014 and 15 ETH more than 2017.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Definitely.
also think that the golden age of ICOs was really two eras. There was like the OG ETH people doing the first few ICOs, and
Hmm.
then there was like 100x that in copycats after.
Hmm.
Um, and the people involved were very different. The first group, like, had been around in ETH for a while, very idealistic, um, good intentions, but all the projects from back then were crazy in several dimensions. One was just like too futuristic crypto. I mean,
Yeah.
hindsight's 2020, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
relied on ETH 2.0, which is still kind of just barely not there, hopefully. And then also, so far from like product market fit, that's, laughable. But, at least then it was like trippy product market fit.
Wait, so
Like stuff
you
was
mean like
weird,
DAO era, like the DAO kind of stuff or
like
whatever?
the DAO to Gnosis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and this also, I guess, includes like Cosmos, Dfinity, Golem, Status, missing a few.
Yeah.
But there was that era, and then there was like, I don't know, several hundred ICOs and Dentacoin that happened in like the year after that, right? That's
To
sort of
coin it.
like,
I
they
forgot
cloned
about
the
that.
model of the early era, and
Yeah.
it was grifters, and it was
Yeah.
like everything was like, it was basically like, GPT-3 came in
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
took in
Do you
all,
remember the
like the first few.
Do you remember the
um
Urbit scam? There was like even an Urbit, like it was called like Urbit. It was like
Vaguely,
Urbit
yeah.
real estate or something. It was like like a
Yeah,
scam
yeah,
coin
yeah,
about real estate, but it was called. But I guess because we're
yeah,
supposed to be like digital real estate. Anyway, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
You're right that they are different, and they are
yeah. But
separated by like a year.
it's kind of funny too, because like Urbit is kind of like, I don't know, the only real 2016-17 ICO project, in that it's like similarly futuristic and big vision, um, except it
I mean,
works and it's
Cosmos is
real.
pretty real.
Um,
Like, I think, right?
yeah, yeah. No, Cosmos is real. Gnosis is real. I mean,
It's
even
just different.
Dfinity
Gnosis is
is
very
is
different
real.
from what it
Um,
originally
right.
thought it
Yeah,
was
yeah,
going to
yeah.
be, but that's okay.
But the funny part is, like Urbit didn't raise money then.
Yeah, we didn't. Well, we raised some money, but we didn't. Yeah, we didn't raise like a ton of money. We didn't. Well, that was like. I mean, that is probably the thing. Did you read Cryptome as a kid? You ever read Cryptome? Um, Cryptome is still around. Cryptome's really great. Cryptome's kind of like the precursor to WikiLeaks. It's kind of like even more scary, kind of in a
Okay.
way. But well, it's like kind of just OG cypherpunk. It's just all HTML and it's just leaks. It's actually run by this guy who's an architect. Like he's trained as an architect. He's like a New York architect,
Mm.
and he lives in New York. He's always lived in New York. And Yeah, I don't know. It's worth whatever. That's a whole other rabbit hole. But that kind of the ethos of like that era of like cypherpunk stuff, like was so influential to me. And then also probably like kind of serious like system software, like real software projects, like which I always understood to be really hard. So I think coming with that in my mind, then yeah, even those early ICO projects to me, and probably in some ways to Curtis, if I'm like remembering our um, kind of like interactions around that, like the urban office at that time or whatever, like when we were all working together, we looked at all that stuff and we're just like, this is science fiction. Like you guys are full of shit. Like this is never going to work, because it seemed impossible just from this on the merits. You're like, you're never going to be able to build this. Like it's not possible. Um, and just for purely from like a software standpoint, and even from like a regulatory, I was just like, you guys, you're like, hey, we're going to go to war with like like everyone. We're just going to straight up go to war with the government. We're like, good luck. What are you talking
I
about?
mean, it was a crazy
Right.
time, and I mean, I think a lot of those people had some similar reading background, but the primary difference was like y'all were sitting in the Urbit office trying to build stuff for a few years and realizing how hard it is.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't think that had happened at that point. Like Ethereum was fresh. But I guess what I'm saying is like very distinct group of people from the first few ICOs versus everything that came after. I think
Totally.
the view of Urbit at that time, was like generally positive, but there was the Elvish problem and the Fight Club problem.
Yeah.
Um,
What do you mean?
the
Oh, like
like,
Kuna is too hard to understand.
yeah, yeah, and like what's with the weird, naming convention, and then, why is the community secretive and esoteric and weird? Um, and then, I also think it's like it confuses people to see like a pre-Bitcoin era firmly crypto project that is not a blockchain, but
Yeah.
sits generally in the same realm. Um, so I
Did you
think it
feel,
was positive but confusing.
but don't you feel like there's like the interesting thing about all those, certainly like any of those projects that survive, like Cosmos, Dfinity, Gnosis, like the thing that made them work or be able to get big is that they were also able to be like super financialized, right? Like that was like the thing I think I was blindsided by, I guess, or like was not obvious that that was going to happen to me. Do you know what I mean? Like I
Yep.
wouldn't have thought like, oh, this is like a hyper. this is like exposed to hyper financialization, and because that it's so easy to hyper financialize, that will be its like that will be the thing that buoys it along, that like pushes it along. Do you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
I mean,
Like,
like I guess working on prediction markets from the start with automated market makers as smart contracts, it's like that was always my assumption. It's basically like
that's
free
interesting.
DeFi,
Yeah.
same foundations, but like used for different things.
Yeah, but the
Um,
reason that you were interested in that stuff was not because, or that in my memory of a lot of the thinking around prediction markets, like the thinking around the sort of financialization of it was almost from a user standpoint, right? Like it was like you as an individual are going to want to make a lot of bets here because you want to predict the future. You like want to see the outcome. Not thinking about it as like, hey, there are giant pools of capital in the world that just want to find upside, and like this is a superconductor for like that activity.
um, I would put it a little differently. I think I saw, like event contracts as sort of like an extension of how markets already work, finding information.
Wait,
Like we
what's
have
an
the stock
event con?
market.
Oh, okay, sure.
An event contract is like a prediction market contract. A
Okay.
share
Oh,
in any sort of
yeah,
event, right?
yeah,
So if you just look at stocks and you say, all right, well, like the market's really good at predicting the performance of a stock and
yeah,
figuring out where capital should go. And then you say, all right, like, we can make shares in any sort of information future.
right.
And then money's going to flow through it. It's like, okay, you get like a crazy hive mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
you
Okay.
sort of need both.
Yeah, this is where this was like the missing piece for me. We were joking, like Philip and I were joking about how, in some ways, like Urbit is this intensely, it's like a genuinely naive project. Like there are things that we didn't understand that we were trying to do, at like how hard they would be. You know what I mean? And then it's also like a willfully naive project, where I think, especially for Curtis and I, like we both knew how hard things were, but we were like, look, it's better to just start over. Like maybe actually starting over is better or something. Like just starting fresh. But the one thing I think we were genuinely naive about is, yeah, is basically markets and market making, and like just the dynamics of the of of sort of finance broadly, and like how that overlaps with technical progress. I feel like that's not something that I understood until like, I mean, maybe I still don't understand it. Like, but
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
like, yeah.
I think my first pointer to Urbit was probably Xenosystems, which was Nick Land's
Oh, right.
old crazy blog. So,
Yeah.
I'm coming at this from like, you know, capitalist AI reverse time sort of thing. So it's just natural that everything is hyper financialization.
Yeah, that was stuff I was like not even like still haven't even read most of that stuff, which is always like weird to people, I guess. But um yeah, I'm not sure if I'll ever get like fully understand kind of like the I mean the other thing is that we came into that era, right, coming out of I felt like being sort of branded as like such a controversial project, which I always thought was obviously like, you know, a misunderstanding from a kind of old school software community. And then yeah, I was like less familiar with the roots of this. I don't know, like the yeah, where kind of 2017 era like crypto really like came from, I guess. Um, but
Yeah.
I don't know, things have changed so much. Like, um, yeah, it's interesting to see. I feel like there's a well, I mean, do you feel like okay, so crypto now kind of exists, but it exists in this weird liminal state. Like, um, I'm curious, like something we actually never really talk about is like, I mean, we spend most of our time like in the weeds talking about Urbit stuff. So I'm curious then, like under the current circumstance, it feels to me like one of the best things about crypto being in kind of like whatever in decline to some extent, or at least it's not as big and sort of, I don't know, doesn't occupy people's attention in the same way, is that, yeah, our approach of being pretty focused on like just making stuff that is useful is like hits a little bit different than it did like a year ago. Um, but I'm curious how you think about like, I don't know whether that seems true to you, and also like whether or not like how you think about like existing, what happens to crypto basically. Like it's very unclear to me. Like there's kind of like a lot of people with a lot of leftover cash, but not a lot of contact with reality. But maybe I'm misreading that.
Yeah, I mean, I think crypto is a lot like nuclear fusion, um, like both in scale of potential, but also in being perpetually in a liminal state of like maybe we'll be real,
Yeah.
but when? Um, and I think crypto is gonna the when is gonna be a lot sooner than fusion. I think it'll,
Yeah.
you know, next cycle it's probably gonna get there. Until then, it's sort of like a series of innovations on open access casinos. But I actually think that's functional. Like it's sort of necessary for that to occur, to capitalize building it and market it and whatnot, even if it is grotesque. Um, so I think we'll get there. I think part of my response to the build something useful is that I think I'm not sure I agree with the decentralized Discord, decentralized social, personal computer, etc., being enough thesis.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the useful happens when that Urbit is paired with trust systems and money, whatever money means.
Yeah.
And I think that coupling is starting to happen. But I also think once that, sort of entanglement happens, it's runaway and you can't ignore the fact that it's, tied to money. So in a way, it's like, it's good that, Urbits remain this like purist autistic savant in the corner, hidden away from crypto. But it's sort of like its time has come. Um, it's also I find it really hilarious that, I mean, to me, ever since like the Ethereum booms, everyone coming into crypto is looking for the next Ethereum.
Yeah.
Um, and it's like 2023, almost 24, and like 2015 Ethereum's just like sitting there right out in the open. And
Yeah, yeah.
some people are seeing it now, not as much as should, but also you can't even really buy it. It's sort of like a huge
Well,
joke,
it's
in a
not clear
cool
how
way.
it becomes like financialized, right? I think that's like the thing that people get
That's
stuck
the
on.
why. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
I think there's three whys, but that's probably the biggest one. And it's like, I don't think the value of galaxies, stars, and planets are like well defined. Um, and I think that's partially narrative, but it's partially like, maybe that's work that should have happened in the few years since Curtis left, but no one has really stepped in and said like, this is what a galaxy does, this is what a star does, this is what a planet does with money in the equation.
right.
Like how do you define trust relationships between those things? And I think that's the missing piece. And it's also it's confusing, right? It's like, what is the Urbit token, if any, and what does it do? It doesn't look like a Bitcoin or a ETH or whatever. Yet it's still out there in the open, and it's like, I don't know, Urbit. I think we're in like top 20 devs, in crypto, and
I
then
mean, dude, those some of those developer numbers are pretty suspicious. We were just talking about this the other day.
the
Not for
Urbit developer
us.
numbers or
No, no,
the
no, no, no.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
no, no,
our developer numbers are like we're like
yeah,
very
yeah, no,
conservative about it. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
hesitating to say top 10 because it's
Yeah. Yeah.
so insane to
Yeah.
think that like Urbit in like dev numbers and quality might actually, I mean, I think it's at least top 20,
Yeah.
possibly top 10. And then the
Well,
market
wait,
cap is
have you
like
seen this already? No, I don't think
170.
anyone's seen this. Yeah, it's insane. Like, but the thing that is really interesting to me is the like, Oh yeah, no. So yeah, Josh was trying to. Sorry, maybe I don't know if he'll actually ever publish this, but he was just digging in because there's all these public data sets on developers and trying to understand them. And the some of the so I guess I can, yeah, not naming any of the projects, but some of those top 10 projects, I mean it's insane. Like over 6 months going from 1,000 and you're like like maybe, and then but over 6 months just going from like 1,000 to like 200. I mean it's like these crazy, or like
Yeah,
under 100, just getting killed. And Urbit developer numbers are just kind of like just steadily increase over that same time period.
yeah.
um
Then the other thing is like Urbit devs, are like financial masochists. The
yeah, they're
other,
not.
like projects, it's like they're like fleas going to like whatever thing has a
Yeah, I
large
mean,
developer fund, and then they leave, and then Urbit
yeah,
devs are just like they're like monks or something. They're just here working on it.
yeah, they
But
just
it's
like,
it's funny. It's just like Urbit's just like sitting here,
yeah,
um, and there's also like there's plenty of there's like the Urbit cult on Twitter that are like talking about how cool Urbit is. So like most crypto people have exposure to it. I mean, not financial, but can see,
yeah,
oh, this
see
thing's
it.
going on, but like people can't comprehend. Um, so I don't know. I think I'm excited because I think in the next 2 years there's going to be like a what the fuck moment, when like Urbit starts doing more and more things. Um, and yeah,
Yeah, I still don't. Yeah, it's kind of like out of my. Um, I get the concept of like the productive bubble, right? That's basically, or that's the way that for me it's always been, or most recently been framed in a way that I can totally understand, right? So basically, the canonical example of that, I guess, is like railways. So there was a huge railroad bubble in like I don't, 1800s, some point. And you look at the map of the railroads, it's like over a 10-year span. I can't remember the years. And in, whatever 18, must have been like 1820, 1830, something. Like there's like three railroads or whatever. You see like a few lines. And then, 10 years later, it's like the whole country looks like a spider web. And there's been this massive speculative bubble around the importance of the railroad, how all railroads are going to, like, that's how you're going to make money. And of course, that bubble also popped, and from an investment standpoint, it was kind of a disaster. Like, if you were a major railroad investor over that time period, you may very well have gotten killed. But the outcome was you made a massive, like, infrastructural improvement, right? Like you got railroads, like the country got wired with railroads, and then now you have goods moving around a different way, and you have all these other like fundamentally useful things that happen. Um, and so I can see the, I think it's very, bubbles are like hard to reason about if, yeah, if you like me or are really just care about the substance of the thing. I'm like, I want it to be really good. I want it to be really genuinely useful. So yeah, there's a certain amount of kind of almost like I'm like, oh, the Urbit bubble is going to be insane. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be really confusing and weird. Um, and I can see, yeah, you can imagine that if you kind of hook up, you take Urbit and you like connect it to hyper financialization, it's going to be a really weird. It's going to be a weird phenomenon, and it doesn't even seem that difficult to do basically when you start to dig in and think about it. Um, but yeah, I don't know how much you want to get into it because I know it's something you do think about.
yeah. I mean, okay, to sound um, like a total wacko, um, I I think people undervalue crypto. And when I say crypto, I mean crypto plus what Urbit does, so cryptocurrencies and social and trusts and whatever. Um, I don't
Wait,
know.
what do you
I
mean? Like
think,
they undervalue it? What do you mean? Like it's just like underpriced,
well,
or like they don't understand the
well,
impact, or like
both the impact and the price. I guess you're talking about this analogy to it where like there was speculation around railroads. We built a bunch of railroads and then it died down. And I don't know. I think crypto will replace finance and governments. Um, I think like that meme from like, I don't know, pre-Bitcoin and early Bitcoin is now
Yeah.
considered wacko because it's, especially as it like hits up against serious government regulation. But like
Yeah.
I look at it and I sort of look at like the era between World War One and World War Two, and then World War Two and after, when we created like a global financial system, um, thinking it would result in like more global stability via financial interconnectedness and organizations like the UN, which it did. And we also had like a very productive period since. Um, and I see crypto and I hope that it's sort of like the next yeah, iteration of that. Um, and we end up with like crypto being the financial rails for everything, hyper financialization between all these things, corporation states running on it. Um, I guess what I'm saying is it sounds wacko, but I think there's actually a future that's like not analogous to like we build out the rail system, but actually like money and finance is replaced, and it's sort of like a completely new global architecture.
Well, yeah, no, no. The argument with the rail system is similar to what you're saying. It's saying that like, while it was a massively, if you were in that speculative bubble, it seemed like, railroads were gonna, I don't know, like they're the most important thing in the world. And it sort of turns out that that's not the right way to put it. I mean, I feel like we've already seen this. It's like Dentacoin or something. Like if you live through that era of ICOs, you remember this fever pitch of like, it's actually a similar argument to the one you're making of like crypto is going to revolutionize everything, and it's like both true and it creates a bubble in which it is not true. Like not true
Yeah.
in that
Okay.
time frame, right? So
Yeah,
it's
I
like
gotcha.
saying, look, Dentacoin's obviously bullshit, but also you can imagine 20 years from now where dentists do in fact like accept crypto of some form. Like it's not that hard to
Yeah.
imagine. And the bubble created the foundational work that was needed for those rails to exist, those like payment rails, whatever they are. Um, and but the weird thing about bubbles is that like the rationale of the bubble is very different from the fundamental thing that gets created. That's what I'm saying, or that's what I find always like confusing. Um,
Okay, I think
and
we're
yeah,
on
I
the
think
same page. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I,
So
I
I
mean, I
think
sat
like,
out crypto to some degree because of the cognitive effects of like being
yeah,
in bubble after bubble after bubble, and then
right.
watching a few bubbles from the outside. It's like even more clear.
Yeah, it's
Um,
insane. I mean, I think I've
yeah.
always been, yeah, I'm just so naturally skeptical that they always like make me uncomfortable. Like I'm just like I don't understand this. I can't like participate in this. Uh, uh, I okay, but here's the thing though. So I'm with you. I think I'm not very good at speculating about the future, right? Like I'm good at thinking about like what can I build, like what should be made, or like how should it be structurally or something like that's like what I care about. So one of the things that I think um, there are things that still ring true in the kind of like cypherpunk manifesto type of stuff about like, the existence of cryptography, like can enshrine for individuals the ability to have, truly private communication, direct peer-to-peer payments. Like it can basically allow you to self-organize across geography in ways that cannot be, that are like censorship resistant. And then you just watch the SEC just like rip through crypto projects, and you're like, well, this tension basically between the state and between the electronic state, which still has to have feet or whatever, like footings, foundations in the physical world. I don't know, I can't like resolve that tension. I think will probably play out over my entire lifetime, basically. Like I don't think that that will get resolved. But do you actually
Yeah.
think it's going to get resolved? You think
Um,
you'll see it resolved in some fashion?
I think I'm gonna live a very long time and I'll see it resolved in
Okay.
some fashion. But I also think it's like a probably an endlessly ongoing thing.
Yeah.
Um, And I think, I mean, the optimistic take is so many crypto things are on the scam to just joke spectrum.
Yeah.
And as far as like cypherpunk dream, like the most impactful and real projects for that are Bitcoin, Zcash, Ethereum, Urbit, and
Yeah.
SEC has not
Yeah, we don't
stopped
even,
any of those.
but we don't actually, I mean, another thing that's like, this is the other thing about the 2017 era is that we take that stuff seriously, like, and actually are reasonably respectful of, like, we're not, or it's not a vehicle for you to break the law. Like, there are probably ways you could use Urbit to break the law, but like, we're not really interested in enshrining that. It's like,
Right.
um,
Well, it's like, I mean, it's funny because like I didn't watch, I saw like a 10-second clip on Twitter of Robert Kennedy talking about how Bitcoin is like the continuation of like the original American spirit. And then I've heard other people rant about very fun conspiracy theories that what's his name? Gensler is actually a Bitcoin maximalist.
I've heard some of those too.
So if you combine those two things, then maybe American regulatory agencies are actually trying to
Yeah, I mean,
take out the crap of crypto and push forward the hardened pure freedom and cypherpunk elements of it.
yeah, I mean, I've often thought that wouldn't surprise me, right? It's interesting. Like, yeah, I've
Yeah.
always thought that Urbit's definitely like, I mean, there's huge influence in the structure of Urbit from like the structure of the United States as like an institution, like functional, as a program almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, the idea that you have all these more or less sovereign factions, whether they're states, whether they're cities, whatever, and that you come up with ways in which those factions can, coexist, sharing infrastructure without necessarily sharing values. Um, yeah, it's a beautiful idea. It's actually like I think it's broadly successful. This is like something I feel like people often like. I'm like, America is underrated. Like it's amazing. It's working. Like it's actually
Yeah. No,
incredible.
America's like, I was thinking about this earlier. America's a little bit like Bitcoin, in that like the constant conflict
Yeah,
actually results in
yeah,
it.
yeah. It's a feature.
One
It's a
having
feature.
unique freedoms and diversity, and also being stable over long term. Um,
No, so this is
so
like
yeah,
it's very hard to think. Like, it's really hard. I find it hard. I don't know if it's hard for everybody. I feel like people who are good at this have like it's a really great talent, but it's like unstable systems or like are the most long lived, right? Like you want a somewhat unstable system. This is like why finance works, right? Or like why like markets in their current design actually work really well because you just like let basically they're a conduit for conflict and actually the system itself becomes more resilient the more conflict that there is. Um, and it's hard to think that way when you're, or at least I guess for me, I find it like as a designer, you kind of think, okay, you want to design systems that are very stable, but it's like, no, you want to design rules that are stable for systems that are complex and are in tension. Um, and you can see that like the most successful systems are the ones that are like that, right? Where the rules are totally static, they never change, they're like knock, and then what goes on in them actually is constantly changing. It seems almost chaotic, out of control, like it's always on the brink of like melting down. And that's like it's perfect. That means it's working exactly as it should or something, or it's likely to survive.
yeah. As far as crypto long term with governments and regulators, I guess I've I've become comfortable enough with the resilience of crypto that I think a full-on regulatory nuclear crypto winter is unlikely. And like by nuclear, I mean like 10
I
to 20
understand.
years of crypto hardly existing. I think we're like in some ways in a rough period, could get a little worse, but it won't be enough to sort of like really crush it. And then I think there'll be like major updates along major geopolitical events.
Right.
Um, I think like, we have an administration now where, at least on some level, they don't seem to see the benefits of Bitcoin for like our economy and defense and whatnot. But I think, when there's like major conflict and China's doing one thing and we're doing another, or there's other financial crises, it's like as long as it's still there, um, I think regulations will shift quickly.
Wait, what do you mean exactly? Like as long as as the system survives, it could be clear that it's useful in some other fashion in the future.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you need like good crypto, zero knowledge proofs,
Yeah.
Zcash, Urbit, whatever, to make sure that our communication and financial system isn't constantly hacked.
Yeah,
Um,
sure, sure.
or, if China has a crypto that is now like better financial rails for part of the world, it's like I think it's those sorts of things that will cause the government itself to sort of like update and
Yeah.
incorporate it.
Yeah, I agree with that broadly. I think like it's true that most of these things, yeah, the conflict I see is actually less with um, the Western nation, like between crypto and like sort of countries that are broadly sort of westernized, um, because I think crypto is generally in line with like kind of Western values, which is true of the internet too, right? Or like the internet is a very like Western value system embedded thing. Um, and so I think of it kind of like if you see the sort of Great Firewall, like sort of China's overall approach to how it controls the internet, which is a very culturally different approach than what we see here. Although obviously there's some weird things that have weird and warping things that have happened to the internet in terms of its how it's been regulated by the state, but broadly it's much less regulated, right? Anyway, I think that where it's hard for me to, like, on the one hand, I can see the vision of like crypto as this something that is um, totally global, like it's used by everybody everywhere because it's sort of like a natural fit for self-organization and like kind of letting people be self-determined. That's a totally American idea, actually, or a very Western idea. And so it's actually really in conflict with states that don't share that ideology. But of course, like the world is wired already, and there's nothing. It's very hard to actually regulate. So that's where it becomes hard for me to reason about. Like definitely, like China is the interesting one where I'm like, I don't understand how that outcome. I don't think anyone understands what happens there. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's
I'm
less
not sure
within
with
the
China
West.
either. I'm just thinking along the lines of, I mean, in relation to like the United States being stable in its core beliefs, maybe we sway one direction, sway the other, whatever. Um, and I think because crypto is like fundamentally aligned with that over time, the two will
Yeah,
get along.
yeah, I think so. I agree. Excuse me. Yeah, I think it's like yeah, some of the most basic like value props definitely seem like they're, especially as it relates to finance. I mean, there are all kinds of like basic value propositions that are kind of similar to like some of the equivalency to like the early internet's like totally obvious, right? It's like there's just this basic efficiency gain that when you get like, transactions that are direct, organizations that can self-organize, you just like you're making I mean, it's similar arguments that we make about like build software on Urbit. It's like don't run a server is the same as like don't incorporate a business, like deploy smart contracts or whatever. Um, which like yeah, that's going to be true today and 30 years from now, whatever. Um,
Yeah. Part of the what I'm getting at with this is also that I think it's time for Urbit to realize that it's adjacent and should integrate with crypto rather than be off in a
yeah,
corner.
the crux of doing that is like actually just good. Um, or the first thing I think of is just that like um, the if your Urbit is going to host anything that is going to allow you to make a transaction somewhere, then either you need to be able to validate that that thing, that program, that interface, whatever, excuse me, um, is secure, or like it's not Trojan, like it's not man in the middling you, or what, or it is what you think it is. And then you also need the wallet experience to be like simple enough. And it could be that maybe sure, obviously lots of work has gone into. I heard that consensus basically is just MetaMask, right? So that's a lot of capital going into MetaMask.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably just a matter of Gnosis Safe and Urbit integrating tightly.
Because you can, but then wait, how do you mean exactly?
Um, like if you have the crypto that you're using via Urbit is also managed by key infrastructure, and that's Gnosis Safe is interfacing with, and Gnosis Safe is maybe also managing your Urbit key infrastructure, then I think the security is tight enough.
But you'd be going to Gnosis. Sure, it's like the same key that I booted my Urbit with, I can log into Gnosis Safe with, and that's like where I complete my transactions or something like that.
No, I think like this is a little bit, I haven't thought about it and it's a little beyond me, but I guess I think it's a not easy, but easy enough problem to solve. You'd have, I think your Urbit keys aren't managing your crypto, is what I'm saying. But there's an interface that's managing both. So that way you don't need to rely on Urbit key infrastructure to be secure enough to make your large
Oh,
crypto transactions. But the
yeah.
UI is tight.
Yeah, so you can, I mean, your Urbit never touches you can like own an Urbit ID, right, with like one key that whatever, keep very safe, keep on a ledger. And then I can boot an Urbit with like a child key of that is
Yep.
never, right? So that same single key can be the same thing I whatever log into NoSafe with and do other stuff with. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just like making that UX. And then the same thing, my Urbit can propose a transaction, like an Urbit node can propose a transaction to me. The important step is that you need a really user-friendly way to make sure that when that transaction is proposed, someone can actually audit it, because you don't know that what your Urbit proposed is real. It probably is because you kind of know where you got the software, but this could get pretty technical. But anyway, that's like the thing I'm like, how do you make that a really good experience, right? Like, and
Mhm.
um, you can. I mean, did you see the AJ doing, he had done Uniswap and then just did Safe and Osmosis as like self-hosted, like Urbit apps. So now you can like install these things directly onto
I mean
Landscape or Realm or
that's
whatever.
that's sick. I've seen some of his posts, but I can't. There's too much going on now to keep up with.
Yeah.
So I think I missed it.
No, it's nice to see. I like, and it's interesting in this area. It's kind of related to regulation, right? Because it's like in an era of like tightly regulated crypto, um, yeah, you can just distribute dApps over Urbit, and you don't have these like regulatory choke points. Um, my question is like whether or not you could actually get, can you get people? Can you make that move or something? Are you going to get everyone? I mean, what would be amazing actually would be you need to get someone like you go to Uniswap and it's actually just like no, just run Uniswap on Urbit. Like that's
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I guess what I was getting at with the not sure about just decentralized Discord is that if you have a draw like that where, you know, really to use one of these things, you need to use Urbit, then I think it'll get people on. This is
Yeah,
in
but we
territory
could get that.
near
That could
near
be
near regulatory stuff that
yeah, yeah.
I don't like
But it's
thinking
funny.
about even.
It's kind of funny though, because it's like, yeah, it's like we have like an inverse regulatory benefit because which I had never really thought about, right? You're like, the more tightly regulated like dApps are, the more that you should just run those on Urbit and you have less of a regulatory overhead or whatever, or like regulatory risk.
Right. Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to see because if people have done a few of these like torrent tracker projects on Urbit, which I've also thought is always like a pretty good. It's like, yeah, probably more censorship resistant than like. Um,
I'm waiting for the what.cd revival, and I'm hoping someone will finally do it under. But
do you still? But you don't. I've talked to so many people, myself included, right, who like, yeah, used to just survive on Tracker World and now survive on Streaming World. Like, I feel like, I mean, Tracker World was an incredible, it was just incredible, but it maybe is a lost world. No?
Um, I mean, I think the issue is like music's just not the same. Like streaming is like, or in part, streaming has killed the culture that enables a what.cd type thing to be interesting. I think you could build those
Wait,
mechanisms.
that's interesting. So, wait, what do you mean? Like, because you think because music moves faster, or like the type of yeah, what do you mean? Like, what music itself, like the music culture has changed?
Yeah. Um, I mean, to oversimplify it, it's boring and it moves too fast and it's trendy, and then there's also not there's not even the same territories left to explore. But I guess what I'm saying is like the combination of social media and streaming has
Huh.
changed like culture and people in a
Yeah.
way that like a community like what.cd would be, I think, like less interesting at this point. Or it would need to be something fundamentally different. Um,
That's interesting to think about that. Yeah, music culture is definitely like the overwhelming um like DJ culture now is so fast. Like it's I can't imagine, it's like sure I like played records and for a long time and then, it was like something I couldn't keep up with, but more because I was busy with other things, not because the music culture was moving so quickly. And then every time I kind of dip my toe back in and I'm like, oh, what's going on with basically like DJ culture from whatever perspective, the sheer speed of it is like unbelievable to me. Like just how many mixes with how many like the density of tunes, like it's too much. Like I'm just like, how does anyone know who they would follow or something, you know? Um,
yeah, there's that,
I
but
mean,
also the music's bad, partially as a result. It's sort of like this like rapid quest for trendiness and then inflation of musicians and then I don't know, it's like a lot of like sonic territory um, was like already explored. I think like I'm too specialized in like one area of electronic music, but I think it's like over the past 15 years just progressively gotten worse.
I guess the converse though is that then, yeah, there are like a few, it's like either mixed series or labels or something, right, that are just so special and so incredible and so well curated and like have, I don't know, there are these little niches that I like absolutely love. I think it's just that when I imagine being back, if I was like living in that world, it would find it like it wasn't, I don't know, it would feel really alienating or something. Um,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, yeah, there's some good labels, but like, you know, even the absolute best, like current pan, um, doesn't compare to like Aphex Twin releases or the first few
yes.
Hyperdub releases, or like um, Goldie, like early drum and bass. Like it's just like not at all on the same level.
Do you think
Um,
kids feel that way?
um, I mean, I think kids are engaging with music in a different way, and it's like
Yeah.
I think it's just naturally more about trend and social things. I don't think that they're like thinking about it in the same way.
Yeah. I think that's just we old man.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I mean, it is that, but I don't know. I wonder about this, right? It like torments me. I'm like, am I just becoming old and boring? But I try to listen to stuff, and I don't think it's. I think there's part of it that's that. I think I'm getting older, but I also think music just sucks. Um,
I don't think the music sucks. I know what I think we are identifying the same thing, but it doesn't bother me. I actually think music's, I'm no, I'm so happy to consume so much, like the amount of, I consume so much music and I feel like I'm constantly finding stuff that I'm like excited about. But the interesting thing is that I'm
It,
excited
when
about it.
is
It's like a, just
when was
so
that
great.
stuff released though?
Like yesterday.
Let's talk about what are you listening to?
But so I don't know. I'd have to like, this is, it's one, the other thing that's really interesting to me is I have like no memory of, I basically will go through 10 to 20 albums like a week, and put them all, I like every week, just like pull down a bunch of stuff, put it in a single playlist, play that playlist on repeat, and then do it again the next week. And it takes me like 15 minutes, just quickly reading through people's lists and pulling in things that look kind of interesting. And then it's like, I try to keep track of, I mean, occasionally you find somebody's real gem and you're like, oh, I want to kind of keep this in the library. Like I'd buy this on vinyl or something. I don't have time for that, but so I don't do that anymore. But, and then I realized that it almost never happens. I never actually keep, like, I have no memory of, like, it used to be like 10 years ago, you could have like pulled a record off the wall at my house, put it on, like blindfolded me, and I would have been like known exactly what it was, right? I knew every single record. And now it's like you could put my iTunes on shuffle or whatever, Apple Music on shuffle, and I wouldn't be able to name a single thing. And eventually, at some point, I'd probably be like, oh, yeah, I remember that from 6 months ago. I love that one. That was so good. It's a really weird
But
relationship to music.
that that could be the music's fault, right? Like maybe the reason none of it's like so memorable is just because like it's not at the same level as the stuff you used to listen to that really stuck out.
Yeah, I don't know. That is, I don't know. I'm not sure because there's a fluidity to the current way that I consume music that I actually really love. Um, and Yeah, I know. But that's also that's like it's like a flavor thing. It reminds, or I think of it in terms of like taste, right? It's like when you're a little kid and you like try something for the first time, and it's like you're like, oh my God, it's the most delicious thing I've ever tasted, and it's like makes a huge impact on your psyche. Versus like once you've had a lot of ice cream, you're kind of like, I'm good. I don't really need this anymore.
Yeah, and I think through it, it's like a personal challenge of like figuring out what's what with my relation with music, but I think it's both. I think I've
Yeah.
heard too much, but I also think the stuff coming out is like not it's like combination of not new and interesting in relation to other things, and that's partially sonic territory. Um, and then also to some degree, it's like not as genius. I mean, there's a few things that stand out, right? Like I'm like slightly hyperbolizing, um, but like overall, I think the quantity of good things is drastically down.
I don't, it's the thing that I notice. I think this is like, I'm like I can never believe this basically, right? So it's like almost like throughout history, and this is also partially just loving history or something, like throughout history, everyone always thinks the world is ending and the world is shittier than it was before. Do you know what I mean? So I think I'm like allergic to I don't want to be the guy who thinks that, I'm like, uh,
I
you
mean,
know what I'm saying?
okay, but like
Curtis and I would argue about this endlessly,
the
which is
other
driving me
side of it is
crazy
like,
about like,
the Bible's a thing. Um, and there's
and
apocalypse and all that.
it
So
still
it's
rules.
like there's
Sorry.
cycles, but then
Yeah,
there's
sure.
eventually like apocalypse. So we could be in like music
No, but
apocalypse.
but it's a myth. That's the whole point of the myth, right? The myth, it's like a persistent myth. That's my point. It's like the persistent myth is the apocalypse is imminent. And I'm like, the next guy is going to think that too, Like, uh, you had me like trying to also um, find, or like, I'm like, what have I been? I don't even remember. It's like, you can ask me, like, oh, what are you listening to lately that you're excited about? I'm like, I don't remember. Um, Man, okay, you listen to that Beatrice Dillon mix for Palace? Beatrice
Haven't
Dillon,
listened to the.
insane, like
I know,
incredible.
like very musical. I listened a couple years ago to the album that she put out, and is like very, very good, but not great. It's like musically great, right? Like I don't know if she is, but she could be a professor or, like
Sure.
perform in a classical context and all that. But as far as like something that either has genius in relation to prior culture like this is new and succinct in a way that communicates something. I don't think it's there. I think there's too much precedent. And I also don't think it's like, I mean, outside of like, a vinyl nerd, it's not easy to listen to and fun in a fairly wide spanning way.
Well, so the two things I've been listening to, revisiting, I think I'm not, I think you're referencing a different. The record of hers that I really love is the one with Rupert Clairvaux or whatever. That's basically just like solo marimba or something like that. It's called like Studies 1 through 17 or something. Um, and anyway, I agree that it's a little academic in a way. Like it kind of has, it's kind of music nerdy, but I think it's really beautiful. It's like kind of unexpected and beautiful at moments that is impressive. But then her mix for Palace, whatever, skateboards, is like just, it's like goes from like footwork all the way to like Indian classical music, It's just one of those mixes that's like so far wide spanning and it's rhythmically like completely insane. And I think when a DJ, there's something so special to me about when someone can, I think of like Optimo as like the original kind of like pioneer there, where just pulling like can be pulling unbelievable like house records. It's like super high energy. It makes you just want to like dance, and then at this then also be playing like old punk records and old like just all over the place. But anyone who can do that, like crossing genres where you can find the thread. Anyway, that mix was like, I'm
Yeah.
like, damn,
I
this is like,
think I need to listen to that. I'd be more into it. I mean, I'm into her other work, but I think I've listened to the marimba type stuff. You also, if you haven't already, the couple months ago Mesh Final Taipei mix also does that, where it goes from like
oh, try that. Yeah.
classical to gom and like everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, he's brilliant. Um, But yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's like a lot. I mean, will I be still like will I revisit that mix in like 5 years? I don't know. There's still some good, man. The more recent Bill Orcutt records, so good. Jump on it. That record's amazing. Like, you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, whatever. I can start. This is why I was saying there needs to be
Then
another.
start sending me, and I'll
Let's
send
put
you
it
music because I'm
on.
still listening to a lot. Yeah,
We put on, we can put, let's put it, this is like, there's like, Door has its own, it's like its own little world, which I love,
yeah.
obviously, but I do feel like there needs to be another like urban music group that's, um, I don't know, has different energy or something. So
Yeah,
maybe we
let's
can
do
do
it.
that. Yeah. All right, let's leave it there. It's like a good place to call it. You can come join us uh, we should do it as like a read-only group. Did you play with, or have you seen the roles stuff? I really want to start experimenting with roles. So we implemented roles so you can create like arbitrary set of
Oh
roles.
yeah,
So anyway, and I've been thinking I want to experiment with it more because you could do things like have a group where there's like one chat that only, the red team can write to, but the blue team can read, and one chat that the blue team can read and the red team can write. You can like do all kinds of weird overlapping stuff. Um, so you could do the same thing here where you have like different subgenres or whatever, like teams of people who do their own.
let's
Yeah, yeah.
yeah let's set up a group.
All right,
Sounds
all right,
fun.
we'll do it.
Also, I need more music recommendations and motivation to listen.
Yeah, I'm so addicted to like. I mean, I still have like a subscription to The Wire. I'm like addicted to like the stream of music. Like it has to keep going for me. Um, anyway, it's good to see you. Thanks for hanging out. Um,
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
yeah, anytime. Here, I'm gonna fade you out. I can tell you when it's fully swapped.